mean, regardless of how things are going right now, the Warriors are now 2.5 years removed from Durant leaving. Klay tore his ACL, then his Achilles, and still got the big extension. And they're as close as you can get to being back to where it was, which is they're competing for a title at this point. So I guess what is the change in this turnaround? They missed the playoffs for 2 years. Who would you give some love to that maybe isn't getting the same amount of credit or respect for turning this whole ship around?
Well, it starts with Bob Myers. You know, they didn't win in free agency this past offseason, and they held pretty strong on some of their convictions. I don't know if Bob Myers had full say on some of those convictions. Some of those convictions come on from up top, but he is ultimately the one pulling the trigger, even if somebody's right over his shoulder telling him to pull the lever or whatever. He still has to push that button. He still has some agency here. They didn't win in free agency. The guys that they really wanted, they didn't get. Patty Mills is playing for Brooklyn. I mean, you just kind of go down the list. Guys wanted to go to LA. Guys wanted to go to Brooklyn. And they ended up with Iguodala, who we knew wanted to come back. They ended up with Otto Porter and Nemanja Bjelica. And while Bjelica's kind of been an ass as of late, like Otto Porter is a dude. Otto Porter's a really, really good player. The trade-off, of course, is that the best ability that you have is availability, and you never really know. Same thing with Andre Iguodala. It'll be really interesting to see how they handle those rotations in the coming month plus, final 8 weeks of the season, because those two dudes I want as part of the 8 or 9 or 10 in the final rotation for the Warriors, because they're winning basketball players. Maybe Bjelica can fall out, but it's nice to have him as a break glass in case of emergency guy. Kuminga has been just incredible. I expected him to be incredible at some point. I did not give him enough credit for the basketball IQ that he has displayed. He learns something new every night. But Steph stayed the course. Draymond dogged it for year one, but came back hard in year two. Steve Kerr dogged it in year one, came back hard in year two. And I think that, here's a really offbeat one, but let's credit a guy like Juan Toscano Anderson. Let's credit a guy like Jordan Poole. Let's start with Toscano Anderson. Like, he allowed them to find their best version of basketball last year. Wiseman goes down. They got Looney, but they needed a backup five. And they're in the final 20 games of the season, and they're like, what are we going to do? And they get, Draymond plays the five a little bit, and then Juan Toscano starts playing as sort of an Andre Iguodala, or Juan Toscano Anderson can play the five. And that flexibility, that small ball creativity, that sort of basketball IQ over raw skill set that the Warriors have valued so much. Like, I think they were reminded of that in just seeing Juan Toscano Anderson turn into a viable NBA player who was so critical for them down the stretch last year. Let's also credit a guy, and a bunch of guys, honestly, but let's credit Jordan Poole, who was straight up a bust of a first-round pick. Not an early first-round pick, but a first-round pick nevertheless. A bust up until he went to the G League bubble. And let's credit all those great guys down in Santa Cruz for getting him on time, on schedule, teaching him the principles of 0.5 basketball, which is you make a decision, shoot, pass, dribble in 0.5 seconds, making him think quickly, efficiently. And he came back. He was a different dude. And that different dude unlocked a lot of stuff for the Warriors. It, again, allowed them to find their best version of basketball. And they'll probably be marginalized. I bet Juan Toscano Anderson's out of the rotation. But if they hadn't found success, even in just little tastes last year, as they were fighting for a play-in tournament spot, this year wouldn't be possible. Because as much as everyone wants to bitch and whine and complain, and we've certainly done that already on this, about the lack of size, they did find their best brand of basketball in playing without size last year. And their best brand of basketball at the beginning of this year didn't have some extra 7-footer that, has disappeared now and we can't find him. It was still these dudes. So there's a lot of people who deserve credit. It is a really strong organization. And I know people want to roll their eyes at stuff like that, but I'm seeing a Sacramento Kings hat in the background here. Like, you can ask, organizations matter, man. And Joe Lacob might have some, grand ideas about some stuff, and he might overdo it at times, but he writes the checks, big checks. Bob Myers and Steve Kerr understand what it is they're looking for. They have become more flexible as of late without sacrificing their principles. It's a really good organization, and they should be in this mix for years to come, which is about all you can ask for, because they were never going to be the team again. They were never going to be just, absolute ass kickers again. They were always going to have to just be part of the mix. And honestly, they shouldn't be favored in the Western Conference. The Phoenix Suns should be. They're a better team right now. But you give me Draymond Green and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson in any 7-game series, and I'm betting on them because I've just seen it too many times. They know not just how to play great basketball. They know how to break wills. And maybe that's past them. Maybe that's over, but I'm not going to believe that until I actually see it. These guys are generational, if not all-time winners. And I'm very interested to see what happens in this postseason, because it could either be a complete disaster that they ran out of gas. They spent all their energy trying to prove a point at the beginning of the season, and then they didn't have anything left in the tank by the time, the actual points are truly made in the playoffs. Or we could be right back in the situation where they're playing for a title, and who knows when they get into a 7-game series with it all on the line. I mean, it took Kevin Durant and how many other guys going down for them to lose that series to the Raptors. And they're convinced to the core that had they won game 6, they would have gone into Toronto and won. Because I saw Kawhi Leonard moments after that game ended. Dude couldn't walk. I saw Kyle Lowry moments after that ended. Dude couldn't walk. They were on crutches coming out of those games. They wouldn't have made it back to Toronto. They wouldn't. They would have played, but they were done. They were gone, so they were cooked. And Steph Curry had found something in that game 6 that he thought he could exploit again and again and again. And if Draymond Green sees that too, they're going to exploit it. Let this team and their basketball smarts continue to win the day. They're going to win 7-game series, a lot of them, because of how much smarter they are than any other team I've ever seen in my entire life. That 3-man core with Wiggins now along in tow, with Poole now along in tow, with Kuminga now along in tow, with Otto Porter and all of his smarts, with Andre Iguodala and all of his smarts. I still think basketball IQ matters, and it's hard because I do think Phoenix is awesome. I think they got a lot of basketball IQ too. I don't think these other teams are quite dumb, but I'm really interested to see how the Warriors' basketball intelligence, on court decision-making, processing, critical thinking, how that manifests now at this juncture in what was once a dynasty, and now they're trying to get back to that level. I'm really interested to see if they're able to play the songs they used to play, or if it's going to sound like a really bad reunion tour.